Okay, you can start to talk.
Good evening, everyone. This is Mitch from the Rounds for Senate campaign. Thank you for taking the time to hop on our town hall tonight. Governor Rounds is here, and he's going to begin speaking in just a couple of minutes here as we're waiting for a few more people to get on the line. So please stand by for just a second. As you're waiting, if you'd like to ask a question, press 0 on your phone, and you will go into the system, and we will answer your questions accordingly and in order that we receive them. Well, with that, I think we can turn it over to Governor Rounds. He's going to have a couple of comments, and then he'll begin answering your questions. Again, thanks for joining us tonight on our Teletown Hall.
Thank you very much, and I most certainly will not waste your time this evening. I want to get into a series of issues, visit with you about a couple of them, open it up for questions. I'd be happy to take your questions this evening. If we don't get to all the questions, we're going to leave them, and we'll make callbacks or send a note back out to you directly. So feel free to participate, please. To begin with, I just want to share with you that one of the reasons why I was running for the United States Senate is because we have not passed a budget literally in 5 years that's been constructed. What they have done is continuing resolutions. They have not taken the time to pass it in the House and the Senate. The House is doing their job. The United States Senate is not doing their job. When I talked to John Thune about it, he said the only way that we can fix this is if we recognize clearly that Republicans have got to take back the United States Senate and start with new leadership. One of the items that I've expressed a real interest in, and one of the first things that we would like to do, is to pass a bill which the House has already passed. It's been sitting in the Senate, and it's called the REINS Act, as if you're reigning in government. And what it would do would be to stop federal bureaucrats from passing new rules, whether it be in the Department of Education or the IRS or the EPA. And what it would say is literally, if you're going to impact the American economy to the tune of $100 million, and there's 100 of these per year that are coming up from federal bureaucrats, you will not be allowed to put them into effect for the first time unless it's being approved by both the House and the Senate. That way, when the IRS or the EPA comes up with some new crazy rule, Congress has to approve it first, which means the bureaucrats would be held accountable. The bureaucrats would suddenly find out that they cannot, just on their own, come up with a new idea and then pass it into law. They would have to go back and get approval from your elected officials, which means you can hold them accountable. I think this is a great move. In South Dakota right now, we do that on a regular basis. Matter of fact, in South Dakota, we have a rules review committee, and it works. It means that the bureaucrats that sit in Pierre, when they put together new rules, they're not imposed upon the normal person who's just trying to make a living until an oversight committee from the legislature actually says they've been done correctly. The Keystone XL pipeline has to be built. Today, we got farmers and ranchers that drive by their elevators and they see wheat sitting on the ground outside. Why? Because the inside of the elevator is full yet of last year's crop. We've got great crops, but until we get them to market, it's hurting our farmers and ranchers. The railroads tell us that right now they're doing their best to bring rail cars in, but their whole system is congested, and it's congested because we've got a whole lot of unit trains coming out of Canada and North Dakota. Matter of fact, the Burlington Northern alone says over 75 unit trains per week coming out of North Dakota. Anything going west seems to be okay because it's on a straight line where it's down one rail and back on another rail. But anything going east is so full and congested that it literally, what used to take 2 weeks to get from a place like Highmore, South Dakota, to the place where they're going to process the corn or the wheat, if it took 2 weeks 3 years ago, right now that same trip on our rail system is taking 3 weeks, which means it takes basically half again as many cars. And when you get all done, all you've done is added more cars into the congestion that's already there. The solution, pass the Keystone XL pipeline, start bringing down oil from North Dakota and Canada, and run it through a pipeline right through South Dakota. Did you know that South Dakota taxpayers would receive from the Keystone XL pipeline $20 million a year in tax money for having that pipeline in our ground? That money goes back into local governments and into schools. There's also a second pipeline that wants to come through. If that happens, they would also be moving North Dakota oil, which would take some of the pressure off of our rail lines, allow our farmers and ranchers to get their grain into market. That would also reduce what we call the basis, which is the actual cost, the difference between what they're getting at the Chicago Board of Trade and what they're getting at the local elevator. This is critical for our small towns. Finally, I know that a lot of folks out there are concerned about Medicare. They're also concerned about the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare, and what it's done to Medicare. Let me share with you the reason why I have such a concern. The Affordable Care Act was originally going to cost $800 million over a 10-year period of time. Today, they're recommending, and nobody is suggesting it's going to cost our country less than $2.4 trillion. One section within that act, Section 3403 of the act, actually creates an independent payment advisory board paid for out of the Medicare Trust Fund. That's right. Here is an Affordable Care Act rule that creates an entity, 15-member panel. All of that committee's expenditures are coming out of your trust fund, the Medicare Trust Fund, up to $17 million. Along with that, what they get to do is decide what procedures doctors get paid for and how much they get paid for people that are on Medicare. That's wrong. That's not where this decision should be made. It should be made between the doctor and the patient and their family. So, folks, when we start talking about this kind of stuff, we really have to replace Obamacare. And one of the things that I'm sharing with people is you replace it with a patient-centered, market-driven plan, similar to what we had in South Dakota before. For people that started with Obamacare and trust because they came in and they bought insurance, I think you should keep your insurance, and you should be able to keep your insurance. We shouldn't hurt people with that. But I think we have to go back and find a program which truly is affordable. Second Amendment rights, the ability to own a gun and so forth. There are folks right now in this race that clearly think that we should have more ownership review, that there should be universal ownership checks for guns, for owning guns and so forth. I think we're going to go a long, long way down the wrong road if we allow that to start happening right now. Our Second Amendment rights have to be protected. And finally, something else that I think everybody in South Dakota should be concerned about, and is right now the United States Senate has actually started approving judges, the federal judges, with a majority vote rather than a 60-vote rule. They did it because the Democrats said they were frustrated because Republicans were asking questions of these judges and they didn't want to have just liberal judges. Now what we've got are the Democrats in a hurry passing through and putting judges on the bench that will be there for the rest of their life. And they will be people that were making decisions, and in many cases they are people that are unacceptable to the middle class of America. This is wrong, and it's got to be stopped. This is one of the reasons why we have to take back the United States Senate. We've got to literally come back in and start creating a Senate that works along similar type rules than what we used to. And by that, what I'm saying is the United States Senate has to start working side by side and agreeing to disagree on some issues, but agreeing to get stuff done. Right now, they're averaging about 2 votes per week. That is also wrong. They need to get back to work again. My message, we pass a budget every single year. We do our best to balance the budget. We start the process of reducing the national debt from $18 trillion back down. It's not going to happen overnight, but if you reduce the amount of bureaucratic tape that farmers and ranchers and business people in South Dakota have to put up with, they can start keeping a little bit more of their profit and spend less of it on bureaucracy. And with that, I've just touched on a few things just to kind of pique your interest. I'd love to take your questions. We'll sit down and just start going through them. And I think we've got some folks on the line right now who would be able to. And let's just start out with Jeff from New Underwood. Jeff, you have a question about EPA issues. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, like you said, my name is Jeff. I am from New Underwood. My family's owner-operators down there. We run a ranch, and I was just wondering what you would do about the new EPA regulations about different farm ponds and runoffs and things that they're looking to make rules on. What's your opinion on that, and what would you do if you came to a vote?
Jeff, thank you. You were breaking up a little bit. Let me share it with everybody else what you were talking about. You're talking about the EPA rules, and the EPA rules that we're talking about are also known as Waters of the United States. And what the EPA is now proposing, and they've put it out for public comment, they believe that they should now have control over farm ponds and the water quality in farm ponds if that farm pond ever flows into a tributary. So if you get a 6-inch rain or an 8-inch rain, and you get movement of that farm pond water out of that and down to any kind of a creek or a stream, you have to, under their guidelines, they think that you should be required to get permits from them to have that. This is wrong. This is a land grab, and the only way that we're going to stop it is to have the United States Senate step back in and say either, number one, we're not going to fund the dollars that it takes for you to go on out and enforce it, and number two, under the REINS Act, we could stop this. We could stop this from happening because the EPA has to be under the control of Congress, and the REINS Act would require that the EPA bring it to Congress first, and Congress would have to approve it. I'm going to go one step farther on this EPA issue because these folks are out of control. Right now, when it comes to carbon taxes, did you know that the EPA now has a new program out there in which they are telling the American public that our new energy policy is designed to reduce climate change? And the way that they expect to do it, number one, they've stopped the Keystone XL pipeline from coming through. But number two, they've actually proposed a carbon tax on your utilities. And the cost of that carbon tax for the average American family, according to the United States Chamber of Commerce's own survey, will be, now get this, $140 per family per month. Now, these aren't make-believe rules. These rules have actually been proposed, and they are in a comment period. This is serious stuff that's going on right now, and it will impact our country negatively. The Keystone Pipeline, here's another example. They're slowing down, and they're not approving the Keystone Pipeline. They've actually got a new survey that I think came out about 7 weeks ago. It comes from Europe. And in it, they say that the Keystone Pipeline is bad because it'll create climate change. And the reason why it will create climate change, you'll enjoy this, is because if we get the Keystone Pipeline in effect, what happens is the average price of fuel on a per gallon basis is reduced to the American public by 6 cents a gallon. And if your price of fuel goes down by 6 cents a gallon, these brilliant people have decided that you will then buy more fuel and you will burn more fuel. So what that says is that the farmer or the rancher is going to go around his field more times to harvest it, right? It means that they're actually going to use more fuel to harvest because it costs less. You and I know that's crazy. What they're trying to suggest is that they're going to try to stop climate change by making the American people pay another tax. We got to get a hold of this thing before it's too late. Jeff, thank you very much. I probably went on farther than what you were expecting, but the way we fix it is we got to get ahead of the EPA, and we got to get control of them. And the American public have got to be able to go to Congress and demand that they get their fingers around the EPA and stop this mess before it's too late. Now, I've got another call coming in. Here's one. Let's go to Pearl in Ashton, South Dakota. And I think you had a question on Obamacare. And I'm not sure, Pearl, whether or not we've answered it or not, but would you go ahead and bring your question up for us? Pearl, are you there? Okay, I don't think we've got Pearl on the line anymore. Let's go to Gail in Sioux Falls, and she says, would you please address the EB5 issue? Gail, are you with us? Okay, she hung up. Hey, let me talk about that for a little bit because this is something that's been in the news. The EB5, and let me explain what it is. EB5 is a federal program. It's a federal program that's been in effect since 1990, has bipartisan support, Republicans and Democrats alike. What it proposed was for people that have money that live outside of the United States, they would like to, in some cases, get what we call a green card, which would allow them to work in the United States, a visa. It does not give them citizenship. It does not sell them citizenship. What it does is allow them to come and work in the United States if they invest in an agricultural area in the United States, like South Dakota, if they invest $500,000 in a project that is, under the government's term, at risk. And what that means is they can't put it into a bank where they've got security on it or where there's any guarantees. They have to invest in projects. Well, South Dakota, along with, I think, 47 or 48 other states who have over 500 offices that are out looking for people that might want to do this, South Dakota was very successful in bringing investors. In fact, we had over $600 million in investments from people who wanted to come to the United States who invested in projects that were domiciled or located within our borders. A lot of them were dairies, particularly because, we've got the cheese facilities and new cheese plants going up in and around Brookings, and because right now most people agree that Brookings is kind of the epicenter of where some of the best cheese and dairies can be located any place in North America. Well, these dairies have set up. All of them have succeeded except for three. 3 of them filed for bankruptcy, were bought out of bankruptcy, and are now operational. The turkey plant in Huron is another good example. It employs hundreds of people, and it actually processes almost 5 million turkeys per year that are grown right here in South Dakota. The Deadwood, out in Deadwood or Lead Deadwood, the Mountain Grand entertainment facilities are part of an EB5 project as well. 2 natural gas-fired power plants for the REAs in South Dakota were EB5 sponsored projects approved by the federal government. And finally, the one that's had a lot of attention in the news is Northern Beef Packing, which went bankrupt, has been bought out of bankrupt by a company called New Angus. The plant is valued at well over $120 million, and they expect to open up and will be processing 1,000 head of livestock per day. So we're very excited about the prospects of what that'll do for farmers and ranchers who will finally have a place where they can move their fat cattle without having to move it hundreds of miles out of state. It should save us a lot of money, and it should really help with new productivity in the farm market in eastern South Dakota, parts of North Dakota, Wyoming, and Minnesota. So we're very excited about that happening. Now, the EB5 program, and right now, what did happen is when Northern Beef filed for their bankruptcy and so forth, it brought it to the attention of a lot of people, and they said, what's this all about? It is a private project. There's private funds invested in it, but we had literally over $600 million invested across South Dakota with over 5,000 jobs being created according to the federal reports. In the meantime, the EB5, I think, is a good program, but Democrats have made it very clear that they want to make it a political issue. I've shared that I think overall it was good. It had bumps in the road, but nonetheless it's a project that it put together a lot of projects in South Dakota. It wouldn't have been there without the EB5 project. I hope, and if I'm fortunate enough, and if you will elect me to the United States Senate, after 25 years in operation, it is time to review the EB5 program at the federal level where it's regulated and where it's a good program, but it could be made better along with the rest of the immigration system that hasn't been touched in a number of years. And I do thank you for your question on that, and if you've got other questions out there along that similar line and so forth, please drop them in. We'll do our best, and if we don't get to them today, we'll be happy to answer them by mail or in person. We do have another question here from Joyce in Sioux Falls, and it's a question about arms control. Joyce, go ahead.
Yes, Governor Round.
Yes.
Governor
Hi,
Round.
Joyce. Yes.
Hi, how are you?
Very
good.
I
do have, thank you. I do have a question about the rights to bear arms.
Yes.
And I think that the hunters and those kind of people definitely do have rights to bear arms. But what I'm asking you is about the mentally handicapped people that are killing people with these guns. Where are the people that got killed rights?
I thank you for your question.
I mean, they have some right too to be kept, to be kept guns out of those people that are having mental problems that are killing people.
I
agree
with you. I agree with you, and I
why
thank
don't
you
we
for the
do
question.
Something about that?
Let me share with you what I think we should be doing, and I'll talk a little bit about this. The real issue on it is how do you put together and make sure that individuals who are mentally incompetent, who the courts have looked at and said, you've got serious issues, how do we make sure that those folks on a federal register cannot get firearms? And I think that she has a very legitimate point. You have to have a good system to do it, but you've also got to have a system that people trust. One of the things that I was always concerned with is that once you create a system like this, not only to people that are adjudicated, in other words, where a court says that they cannot have this thing, for a while the federal government was actually looking at veterans and saying that some veterans coming back with PTSD and so forth should not be allowed to have a gun either. And so we can go way too far on this very, very quickly if we're not careful. And I'm going to go on the side of saying the best way to approach it is to have a clear understanding among everyone that I really think a court has to be actively involved in this process. And people's rights to bear arms have got to be protected, but there has to be a process in place, a legal process in place to allow for a court to actually look at and say, I'm sorry, but you can't have a gun, just like we do with a felon. And in those cases, I really do think that you've got a good point on it, and I thank you for bringing it up. And I think, and this is something that's got to be done at the federal level. I don't think we can do it at the state level, and it's something that I think will be discussed. The fear that people have is once you start going down that route, then if you do it by rule only, the bureaucrats who make the rules can suddenly make the rules broader in an attempt to literally take the guns out of hands of people that otherwise should be able to have those guns. And it's going to be a complicated issue, but I think it's one that's well worth following up on. I'm going to take one more call, and then I'm going to thank everybody for staying on the line. It's been very, very good of you to do it. And once again, we will ask you to take some other or to send questions in and so forth. But let me go in, and I see Jason. Jason has a question from Veblen, South Dakota. Jason, go ahead.
Hi.
Hi,
Mr.
Jason.
Rounds, you are a great speaker, and I've enjoyed listening to all your answers. Do you know how much Mr. Bowen was paid with his participation in the EB-5?
Jason, I have no idea, and let me share with you that Mr. Bowen was an employee of the department or the bureau, the Board of Regents. He was responsible, literally, through the president of the Board of Regents, the vice president, and down to the dean, and he was number 4 in line. So that part of it and the pay scales for folks that work for the Board of Regents, I don't keep track of, and I really didn't follow. So with that, thank you. I appreciate that. And let's go on. Harold in Fort Pierre. Harold in Fort Pierre. Hello.
Yes.
Hi,
Hello,
Harold.
Mike. How you doing?
Hey, good. How you doing tonight?
Pretty good. I knew your dad pretty well. He was my company commander in the National Guard years and years ago.
In the 147th
in
or
Huron.
in
Huron.
Huron. Okay. I remember
Yep.
going to one of those evening meetings one time with him when I was about 3 years old. Yep. Well, Harold, what can we talk about here?
Well, that lady came on about guns taken away from the mentally ill. We need to help the mentally ill. We need to have some facilities, and I've been really hassling everybody around Pierre here, trying to get some help. We need and I've talked to both sheriffs, Brad and Mike in Hughes and Stanley County, and they're in agreement that we're sending a lot of people with alcohol, drugs, mental illness to jail instead of getting them treated and getting them back out working. I got a boy with bipolar, and I have fought this for 10 years, and there's just not much help in South Dakota, period. Now, Yankton is not don't help them. Now, we got the Serenity Hills, and we need more places like that up by Watertown.
Harold,
we need a place
can I ask, is
your
son getting help now?
Well, he's getting us through captive counseling, but boy, I'm not satisfied with the help he's getting. He's not getting no counseling. He has finally got into medication, which seems somewhat better. Not a whole lot. I mean, he makes some real bad decisions. You don't.
Well,
but we need some in-house treatment centers.
One thing that and Harold, I appreciate your call in on it, and I know that other folks have expressed similar types of concerns. I like the idea if a lot of this is handled at the state level as opposed to the federal level, because I think that's where most decisions should be made. But let me just give you a couple of thoughts on it real quick. Yeah. Let me give you a couple of thoughts on it. As to when we get these guys into the penitentiary, and when I was governor for 8 years, it was a discussion on a regular basis. A lot of these folks that are there right now, they do have mental problems. The question has always been, how do you go about finding a place where they can be? Because in a lot of cases, like you say, these guys have made bad decisions and they have committed some crimes. And you get folks on the outside saying, number one, you're supposed to protect us from people that are going to do us harm. And that's one of the reasons why they end up in prison in the first place. But the second thing on it is this. At those facilities, in many cases, we're trying to get them some mental health mental health counseling, and to get them on a regimen where they're actually taking medications that can help them. I can tell you that I think if you talk to the folks down here at the penitentiary, they'll tell you that they're not in disagreement with you, that this truly is a problem. I remember the Chief Justice told us on several occasions that when it came to felony issues, people were either on drugs or trying to get drugs in the vast majority of all the felonies. So there are the biological illnesses like your son has got, the bipolar disorders and so forth. And then there are the ones who have mental illnesses because of drug abuse and alcohol abuse and so forth as well. And it does cost our society a lot of money. You hope that you can find a way to keep them out of trouble, get them back in, and kind of like the 24/7 program for alcoholics, where we tell them, look, you're going to stay off the booze, and we're going to let you stay at home, but you're going to get tested literally every single day and sometimes twice a day, because we're not going to let you get into this stuff. And they get to keep their job, and it's amazing because the domestic abuse goes down. The family can keep their breadwinner at home, and we don't have them locked up in penitentiary, which costs us a lot of money. So perhaps there's something along that line where an outpatient treatment can be done for folks similar to your son. And I'm going to run out of time, but Harold, thank you very much. And if you'd like to look further at this, or if you'd like to, we'll be happy to at the end of the program here, Mitch is going to get back on. He's going to give you a way in which if you've got questions and so forth, you can drop them to us, and we will follow up with all the questions that folks have gotten. Harold, I really appreciate your bringing it up to our attention as well. Thank you. Mitch, you want to take on from here?
All right, for those of you who are still on the line, before we go, we'd like to do a couple of poll questions first off. If you would like a Rounds for Senate yard sign, please push 1 on your phone right now. And we will get a hold of you to make that happen. If you'd like to stay on the line after we're all finished, and you still have questions that have not been answered, we will there will be a recording that will take those down, and we will get back to you with the answers on that as well. I think we've got a significant number on that. One more question before we let you go. Do you plan to vote for Mike Rounds in the U.S. Senate race? Hit 1 on your phone right now. 1 if yes, 2 no. While we're waiting for those of you who are still typing in your answers on that, once again, on behalf of Governor Rounds and the Rounds for Senate campaign team, we truly appreciate you taking part in the teleconference tonight, and we will be doing more of these in the future. So when you get that call, we'd appreciate it if you'd hop on the line. If you didn't get your question answered, we will be available for questions down the road, and we look forward to seeing you in person on the campaign trail. Mike has a very aggressive schedule between now and Election Day. He's going to all corners of the state and all points in between. And we want to see you out on the trail. We want to know what you're thinking. You can go to roundsforsenate.com and check out what's going on the campaign trail. You can see us on Facebook as well as Twitter. And we always want to hear from you. So keep in touch. And, again, watch for another one of these teleconferences to come up. And we look forward to talking with you next time. Thanks so much for taking part tonight. Hello.